Hour number 2 of the program, Tuesday edition, August the 7th, 2018. We're 2 days away from week 1 of the preseason, and I just did that to see if Stats would kick in his Pavlovian response and pump his fists, and there he goes. The bell rings, and Fido begins to salivate because it's time to eat.
What kind of response was that? What are you talking about?
Pavlovian. Pavlovian Texas education.
Yes. I'm still not sure what that is, but don't worry.
Says the West Virginia education guy. All right, let's get right to it. Odell Beckham Jr. still trying to get a new contract with the New York Giants. He spoke to reporters over the weekend. Let me play that sound now because I got so caught up in the discussion last hour, I forgot to actually call for the sound. So here's Beckham. Let's set the stage for this as to what Beckham wants. On Saturday, he was asked if he still hopes to be the highest paid receiver in football. Here's what he said.
Of course. I mean, who doesn't want to get more money? You know, everybody does. So realistically, you know, you just got to be realistic with yourself. You see what happened over the offseason. I can't really worry about anybody else. Just let them figure it out, and whenever it happens, it'll happen.
Okay, here's the thing. The reporting began to emerge yesterday suggesting there is some controversy between the Giants and Beckham. And as it initially came out, Chris, Josina Anderson of ESPN.com reported that the Giants are offering Beckham less than what Sammy Watkins got. Sammy Watkins got $16 million a year from the Chiefs on the open market earlier this season. Then later in the day, NFL media, partially owned by the Giants, reported the Giants have already offered to make Beckham the highest paid player in football. Here's what it is in a nutshell. It all comes down to how you look at the dollars. And typically what happens after a contract is done, the agents will leak the numbers to reporters by using what they call the new money analysis, where you only look at the new years of the deal. Because if you only look at the new years of the deal looks better when you divide it by the total value, the length of the deal. It comes out to, in this case, $17.1 million. That's the magic number. That's how you get north of Antonio Brown. He's at 17. So you do a 5-year deal worth $17.1 million per year. Hey, you're the highest paid receiver in football. In this case, what happened is the agent ahead of time, instead of looking at new money, the agent is focusing on total value, putting in the money that Beckham is due to make this year, $8.5 million, and running the average. And lo and behold, if you consider what he's making this year, he's south of Sammy Watkins. So the conflicting reports that came out yesterday that ESPN says it's under Sammy Watkins, $16 million. The NFL media reporters say it's above Brown's $17 million average. It all comes down to this new money analysis. And here's the bottom line. Right now, they're in one ballpark. That ballpark of taking Antonio Brown's deal and doing a little bit better. The bigger question, Chris, and I want you to answer this for me, is Beckham so much better than the other great receivers in the game that we shouldn't be having this discussion of splitting hairs and how much more is he making relative to Antonio Brown? Should he be so much higher than everyone else?
I'm not going to say he should be so much higher than everybody else. I do think that there should be a significant bump in what he makes as compared to Antonio Brown. I just think about where he's at in his career, the type of athlete he is. He's just about to really hit the prime of his career right now as an NFL football player and a receiver, and really becoming nuanced and things like that. So, yes, I do think Odell Beckham Jr. deserves to be paid more than Antonio Brown. Listen, I'm not going to, of course, more. Am I going to say significantly more? No, but we saw somebody like Kirk Cousins sign a contract and get, what, $27 million a year, basically, and then 28, and then Matt Ryan came by and got 30, right? I would think that's fair for Odell Beckham Jr. here, $19 million a year type of average. I think he's that type of player. You keep him happy. He's got the record holder as the highest paid wide receiver. And really, Mike, you and I know, really, at the end of the day, for the most part, it's going to be about the guaranteed money he sees. Unless he signs like a 4-year deal, then it might not matter as much. But it's really going to be about the guaranteed money and the amount of money he can see in the first 3 years of that contract. That's really what it all comes down to.
Well, you're right, and they haven't even gotten to that part
right.
yet as the reports come out. I mean, I think this comes down to the value of a 5-year extension. I did the math. You take that 5-year extension at 17.1, and yes, highest paid receiver in football, but you throw on what he's due to make this year, it becomes $15.65
Not acceptable.
million.
Not acceptable.
Right. And the irony here is the agent, before the deal is done, is focused on this total value calculation, which the agent never wants us to do. It's after the fact. Oh, no, it's new money. Only look at the new money. No, you don't look at the new money because it's one big deal, and you have to look at what the total value is at signing. And the team, for a change, is pushing this new money analysis. So this is all being turned on its head as the two sides try to squeeze each other into doing the deal. And the bottom line is this, Chris, if Odell Beckham Jr. really wanted to set a new bar so much higher than what anyone else is making, he should have done the one thing that you and I advocated a year ago.
Right.
He should have held out the same way Aaron Donald is holding out, the same way Khalil Mack is holding out. Now, it's not getting those guys their contracts yet, but it's a lot harder. If you want to get a transcendent contract because you believe you're a transcendent player, you've got to stay away. You've got to withhold services. Because what are the Giants losing here?
Yeah, I know.
What are they facing?
You're right.
They still have him in camp.
Yeah, the only threat they're facing right now is the fact that they have to talk about this and they have to hear about it on talk radio, and they might have to have public backlash when people like myself who root for the Giants and Odell Beckham Jr. hear reports that he's going to get paid less than Sammy Watkins. You're going to get public backlash. Sorry, for a guy like Odell Beckham Jr., who, I want to remind people, is the fastest to 250 receptions in the career in the history of the NFL. He's the fastest to 4,000 yards in the history of the NFL. He's the most games with 125 plus yards in the first 3 seasons. The guy is on pace, and the injury, of course, last year threw him off a little bit. But he's on pace to be first ballot Hall of Famer type of talent, type of guy. Now, getting back to what you said, taking away his leverage and playing business, I'll go back to what we talked about to start the show, right? With John Mara and the Giants being in the football business. I'm mad at Odell Beckham Jr. because, yes, I do think he should have sat out and played hardball, but he knows the Maras, he knows the Giants. He also knows that he's done a few things that hasn't got them in their good or got himself in their good favor. And he's playing business the Giant way, which is, I'm going to change my perception publicly here in the tri-state area, in the New York area, and I'm going to be Johnny Professional for the Mara family, who's, owned the Giants since the 1920s. And he's putting that foot forward. And it sounds like, to this point, at least progress is being made. I mean, we're not going to say he did the right thing until he gets the big deal. But for the most part, I do think he's changed his perception up here in the New York area, and I do think he's got things going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely. And the bottom line is that it's in the Giants' long-term interest to get this done. However, the big business reality for these teams, whether it's the Giants and Beckham, the Raiders and Mack, the Rams and Donald, the key is what we could do this year, next year, the year after that, versus the kind of money that the player wants. And I think that's precisely why these deals aren't done, because the teams recognize that we have rights right now. This goes to Aaron Rodgers as well.
Sure.
The Packers look at, they've got him under contract for 2 more years. They could tag him for 2 years after that. I've done the math already there. They could keep him for less than $25 million a year for the next 4 years. So why trade that in? Right? In a sport where that serious injury is lurking around every corner, why in the world trade in the rights you currently have for some huge windfall that you're not required to give, especially because none of these guys, well, I can't say none because Donald and Mack are away and who knows when they're going to be back, but Beckham's in camp, Rodgers is in camp. Why should we do anything? And I think and I think what happens, Chris, and this gets back to why you and I believe that players should always take a stand and get as much as they can when they can, because they only have 1 or 2 chances for their careers.
That's right.
The teams are dealing with this all the time. This is what the teams do. They've been in business. The Giants have been in business for 100 years. They've dealt with players after players after players, thousands of players, tens of thousands of players. They're not going to get emotional about any one of these players, and that makes it easier to make a dispassionate business decision, and that's the disconnect here. And the Giants, I think, believe it's sufficient to say, hey, we'll make you the highest paid receiver in football. That's what you want. Here's your 17.1 on a new money analysis, and that should be good enough. And I credit the agent because it's clear the agent's feeding this information to ESPN.
Right.
for turning the new money analysis on its head and saying, no, this is really a deal that's only worth $15.6 million, and that's not acceptable. And this guy is so much better that we shouldn't be worrying about beating Antonio Brown by just a little bit. We should give this guy the money that reflects his overall value to the game. The problem is the Giants can say, we'll just go year to year, and by the time he's able to hit the open market, Saquon Barkley will be the face of the franchise, not Odell Beckham Jr.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It could be that way. I'll argue it in this fact. I mean, first of all, yes, as we talked about, for Odell Beckham Jr. to receive an offer, I don't care with how you play with the numbers, that's less than a Brandon Cooks or a Sammy Watkins or a DeAndre Hopkins or Mike Evans is, I mean, outright disrespectful to Odell Beckham Jr. So I sure the hell hope he doesn't take anything like that. The other thing I'll say is where I do think he has a little leverage here with the Giants, and it's the Giants working against the Giants a little bit, but the Giants are a professional organization, like we've talked about. The Maras, the Tishes, they want to do good by their football players. But I think they also realize that they have a talented team with a quarterback who is on his last leg. I mean, this is the last year or two of the Eli Manning era, and for them to say, okay, we're going to make a distraction with our best player on our team and not have him signed and make this media spectacle. And, oh, yeah, man, our quarterback who's on his last leg, he's only actually very good when Odell's in the game itself. So
how much of a distraction is it really for the Giants? He's in camp,
yes,
right? Who cares if there's always going to be stories about the Giants. It's got to be something. So who cares if the story's about whether he's been offered $17.1 million or $15.6 million? That's nothing compared to what it could be. So, okay, we'll deal with the distraction. We'll keep our money in our pocket, and we'll just play this out instead of giving the guy, you know, the $20 million a year contract that he seems to want.
Yeah, well, it's early right now. Let's wait till we get a little bit later here in the preseason and training camp. And if we're still having the same conversation about $16 million, it's going to become a distraction. And I'll tell you, this is where I think the other area it'll affect the Giants. It's going to filter into the locker room. The locker room's going to look at management and look at the owners and go, damn, this guy has been a baller for your football team, and you guys have really only been in existence and relevant the last few years because of this guy, and you're not going to reward him. And then he took the risk of coming to training camp on a lame duck 1 year, $8.5 million deal as the best receiver in football. That's what the Giants will have to worry about, because other guys in the locker room are going to start to speak out and start to be disgruntled about it, and then it's going to become a distraction and a conversation in the locker room even when the media is not there.
Do you really think that the locker room at large is going to coalesce and rally around the poor, mistreated Odell Beckham Jr.? I don't see that happening, and I think this gets back to all of his antics from the last few years. Look, I don't know the dynamics of that locker room, but I think human nature would tell me that there isn't going to be a bake sale / pity party for Odell Beckham Jr. in that locker room, because he's created plenty of distractions for that team on his own.
Yes, he has. I get that, and really the biggest distraction is the boat trip. Okay, let's just say that he went to Miami on a day off, and it wasn't the best look during the week wild card playoff game, and he dropped a few balls to start that game, and that's really where it started from. He's not been that bad overall for the most part. I mean, yeah, he proposed to a kicking net. He threw a right jab at a kicking net. Oh my gosh, that's so horrible. What a bad guy. But everything I know, Mike, is that the locker room loves Odell Beckham Jr. and the people within the Giants organization love Odell Beckham Jr. So you're right. I'm not trying to sit here and say that the guys in the locker room are going to create a mutiny and start marching up the stairs to the Mara office and being like, "You better pay this guy," and they getting their pitchforks out and and getting mad at him. No, but I do think that the players will start to fuel the public fire of perception about, hey, they need to pay this guy. It's ridiculous how awesome he's been, and he hasn't done this. And then that's going to fuel the talk radio here in New York, and then it becomes a huge spectacle, and that's where I say it can get out of control.
I don't think it will be. I don't think it will be, because as games get played, especially regular season games get played, the vacuum gets filled by talking about what the team is doing, and these contractual niceties end up fading toward the edge of the radar screen. That's what I believe, and I also believe we have to take a break.
We got to take a break.
We got to take a break.
All right.
We got to take a break.
Yeah.